Good evening, everyone. We are continuing in our quest to complete and learn Masechet Rosh Hashana. We're almost there. There is a Mishnah. We have some very nice topics. There's a Mishnah on Daf Lamed, on the bottom of Daf Lamed. That's what we're going to pick up from for tonight. And I think before we start, Mr. David Delamani, he wants to ask a question. David, if it's on topic of the last year, please go ahead. What's your question? How can I answer your question?
Yeah. So anytime it said you were only allowed to blow the shofar in the presence of the court, that would be within the time by default also, correct?
Yes. You might be able to say physically in the courtroom, even though none of the members of court are present. So technically you could say, if the judges leave at 3 o'clock, but at 12, but at 3 o'clock, I go to the court and blow the shofar, you might be able to say that it actually, you could be in the presence of the Bet Din without being when the Bet Din's in session. But I would say the simple understanding is as you assume. It's the requirement is to have both in the presence of them, and if you're in the presence of them, it's going to be while they're in session. That's right. Okay, good. Let's pick up. Mr. John Kamali, Shalom Aleichem. We said hello to everyone else. Mordechai, it's your holidays coming up. It's nice to see you, John. Okay. Let's go. I'm going to share the screen. We're now going to have, everyone remembers who was the name of the Nasi, of the president of the Sanhedrin. What was his name? Who he made an enactment for the city of Yavne. What was his name? Yeah, very good. Say it again. Just very good. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Beautiful. Shalom Aleichem. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. There's one piece of trivia here. You probably could add this to Kami's corner. Kami used to join the class and we would write things on the corner for him. But there's like a glossary type of thing. The name of the, yes, please. The name of the rabbi, the title that you gave him was Rabban. What does the Rabban mean? Very good. Just say it as though it's like simple. Yeah, very good. He's the Nasi. The title Rabban is reserved for the president of the Sanhedrin. So anyone know of any other Rabbans? Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel is a Nasi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was a Nasi. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was a Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, we would call him Rabbi, but same thing, we would call him Rabbeinu, which is the same. Rabban is plural, our rabbi. Rabbi is my rabbi, like Rav Sheli. Rabban is the rabbi of all of Israel. Rabban Shel Kol Yisrael. So it's like this plural, it's a title reserved for the president, the Nasi. So the Nasi of the time after the Beit HaMikdash was Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. He moved the Sanhedrin to Yavne, the city of Yavne, and he made a takana. What was the takana that he made that we learned about last week? Very good. That you could blow the shofar in Shabbat in Yavne. That's exactly correct. And there's some machloket whether in front of other courts as well. But that's exactly correct. In the times of the Beit HaMikdash, they would blow the shofar in the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, he made a takana that they would do it in Yavne when it moved. Okay? Now that we got into the world of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai making takanot, making enactments, we're now going to read a few more of them. And we're going to see, tonight we're going to see hopefully 3 more enactments. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was at a pivotal time period of history. After the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, you could imagine the people are demoralized. Right? The nation is destroyed. People are exiled. People don't have the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. The rabbis were slaughtered. People were killed. His job was to make sure the flame is alive. And part of what he was doing was coming up with new enactments. We're entering a new generation, new time period, new challenges. So he had to come up with different, and this is after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Who knows when we're going to get it back? It happens to be we haven't gotten it back yet. So his job was to go from one thing to the next. He was like in the transitionary, the bridge. Yeah, exactly. He had to make sure that the world doesn't forget. The Jews don't forget about the Beit HaMikdash. And they don't forget about, there's a couple of reasons why, but it's centered around the Beit HaMikdash. So let's go ahead, read this Mishnah, share screen. Okay, this is a Mishnah on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, a lot of fun. This is on 30a 4. Mishnah says, Barishona haya lulav nital b'mikdash shiv'ah. Similar construct to our last Mishnah about the shofar, how it used to be like this, but now it's like that. Same story. Barishona, initially, meaning during the times of the Beit HaMikdash, haya lulav nital b'mikdash kol shiv'ah. The Beit HaMikdash was taken, or nital means to take, on netilat lulav, to shake the lulav. It was taken in the Beit HaMikdash all 7 days. But outside of the Beit HaMikdash, or outside of Yerushalayim, 1 day. Imagine that. Here in America, I guess if there were Jewish people and they were doing this mitzvah, they were only shaking the lulav for the first day. That's it. That's the only thing that they would do. But after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Hitkin Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made an enactment. That outside of the Beit HaMikdash, outside of Yerushalayim, as the Rambam tells us, they would take the lulav for 7 days, Zecher HaMikdash, in commemoration of the Beit HaMikdash. This is what we used to do then. This is what we're going to do now to remember what we used to do then. There is this concept of Zecher HaMikdash. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was in this position that said, did you know that in the Beit HaMikdash they would take the lulav for all 7 days? Yeah, during that time period, everyone knew it. But he knew that the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. If the whole world is taking lulav for only 1 day, because we're all outside of Yerushalayim, all outside of the Beit HaMikdash, and we're taking lulav for 1 day, it's going to be forgotten the fact that in the Beit HaMikdash they would do it for a whole week. It's what he enacted was, again, to remind us of the Beit HaMikdash, so that this way in the future we don't come to make a mistake. This type of thing, it's more of in the future, tomorrow there's going to be a Beit HaMikdash, then they're going to say, okay, we need to do it all week. They're going to say, what are you talking about? We didn't do that. So what he did was he enacted that the whole world would take the lulav for all 7 days. Okay? You guys are familiar with the pasuk? Does anyone know what the pasuk of the source of this mitzvah is? Anyone know where the pasuk of lulav is? Sorry? Okay, you're quoting them. You're quoting me the pasuk. Exactly correct. Do you know where it is? It's in Parashat Emor. So look, I'm doing this so that you see. You go to Tanakh, you go to Leviticus, that is Vayikra. Parashat Emor, Ukachtem lachem hayom harishon. I'm pretty sure it's Aliyat Shavi'i. No, it's before it. Aliyat Shishi. Found it. Here we go. So this is the pasuk that talks about the mitzvah of lulav. Okay, read this pasuk. You tell me how many days you have to take the lulav. Ukachtem lachem bayom harishon. On the first day of Sukkot, we're talking about Sukkot. And on the first day, you should take Pri Etz Hadar, which is etrog, Kapot Temarim, which is lulav, Anaf Etz Avot, Arve Nachal, Etz Arava, Hadas Arava. Usmachtem lefnei Adonai Elohechem, and you should rejoice in front of God Shivat Yamim for 7 days. How many days should you take the lulav?
1 day.
1 day. Why do you say that?
Because it says Ukachtem lachem bayom harishon.
Because the pasuk says take it on the first day. You have Sukkot is 7 days. Sit in the Sukkah for 7 days. On the first day you take the lulav. Fine. But what's the second half of the pasuk saying? You shall rejoice in front of God for 7 days, right? So you could be happy. How would you be happy? Yeah, you can't drink them. Yeah, you eat meat, you drink wine, you do things of happiness. You go spend money on a trip and a vacation. You go with the kids and go on a trip. Yeah, you go Chol HaMoed. If you go to a Bronx Zoo, mamash, there's a minyan every second. Everywhere you go, it's just Jews. Everywhere you go anywhere during Chol HaMoed, you're gonna find Jews. Baruch Hashem, because that's what you're supposed to do. Usmachtem, you should be happy. But you see what Chachamim say? No, hold on a second. It doesn't just say Usmachtem Shivat Yamin. What does it say? It says Usmachtem Lifnei Adonai Elohechem, in front of God. The phrase Lifnei Adonai means in the Beit HaMikdash. It comes up a couple times in the Torah. It says Lifnei Adonai, before God. We understand that to mean in Yerushalayim, in the Beit HaMikdash. In the Beit HaMikdash, or perhaps even a little bit more extended in Yerushalayim. So it says, take the lulav for 7 days, but be happy in front of the Beit HaMikdash take the lulav 1 day and be happy in front of Hashem for 7 days. They say that means in the Beit HaMikdash they would take the lulav for 7 days. They would have the simcha through this mitzvah. Okay, this is where we learn it from. That's going back to our Mishnah. That's exactly what our Mishnah is saying. I'll read it to you again. Barishona, initially, during the times of Beit HaMikdash, Hayahan Lulav Nital B'Mikdash Shiva. The Beit HaMikdash, in the Beit HaMikdash, they would take the Lulav all 7 days. That's what the pasuk says. V'smachtem lifnei Adonai Elohechem Shivat Yamim. Uva Medina, but outside of Yerushalayim, Yom Echad, just 1 day. Mi shechara Beit HaMikdash, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, hitkin Rabban Yochanan Zakkai sheyeh Lulav Nital B'Medina Shiva. So Rabban Yochanan Zakkai made a takana that we take the Lulav all 7 days. Zecher HaMikdash, in commemoration of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, we don't take it on Shabbat. So when it says all 7 days, it doesn't mean you do it 7 days. It just means that you would do it for the full week minus Shabbat. If Shabbat is the first day, you wouldn't do it on the first day. If it's the last day, you wouldn't do it on the last day. That type of thing, right? But his takana was outside of Yerushalayim, during the times of Beit HaMikdash, it would be 1 day. He made a takana, he wants everyone to do it 7 days, okay? The next takana that he made, V'sheyeheh Yom Hanef Kulo Asur. And the next takana he made is that he wants the entire day of waving to be prohibited. Okay, what is the day of waving? Yom Hanef. Let me explain. This is the mitzvah of Kemach Yashan. Okay, by raise of hands, how many people are familiar with the details of what does it mean to be Kemach Yashan? It's okay if you don't. You're familiar with it, you're familiar with it, you're familiar with it. Let's do the opposite. Who's not so familiar and what's considered Kemach Yashan and what's not? Okay, not so much, not so much, not so much, not so much. Okay, so let me explain. This is something very interesting. What is Kemach Yashan? Kemach Yashan is as follows. It says it explicitly, black and white, or whatever. It says it in the Torah, same parashat Emor, a couple lines before. I could show you this section. This is what the Torah tells us. The Torah basically says that when you plant grain, I don't know if that's the right word. When you sow grain in the ground and grain grows, okay, what we want is that every year, once a year, you're going to collect the grain, and the first batch of it you give to Beit HaMikdash. Right? It's a very simple concept. The concept is the beginning of what you're doing, give to Hashem. Okay? So I'm going to give the markers of the dates in a second, but just for argument's sake, it's like you planted, okay, don't eat any of it until you take a portion, give it as a korban, then you could start eating it. Conceptually makes sense? Right? Makes sense? That is the requirement of the Torah. Now, I'll talk about the dates in a second, but that's what the concept is. So you have this batch of grain. Right now, I can't eat from it because I didn't bring the korban yet. This batch of grain is called Chadash. It's called new. Why? Because I still haven't given anything to Hashem yet. It's still new. It still hasn't gone through its maturing process. The maturing process is just giving a korban to Hashem, giving a portion of it as a korban to Hashem. Okay? Once I take some of this grain and I give it as a korban, now this is no longer new. It's now called old. It's called Yashan. So what changes from being Chadash, which is new, to Yashan? How do you change from Chadash to Yashan? By bringing a korban, not all of it. We're talking about all of the grain in the world becomes permitted or becomes Yashan once you bring a portion of this new grain and you give it as a korban. Okay, now let's talk about the markers. What is the date of that korban? The second day of Pesach. In fact, the korban is called the korban ha'omer, which is the same day that we start the sefirat ha'omer. Why is it called sefirat ha'omer? What does the word omer mean? No. Yes. Sefirat means count. Sefirat ha'omer means the count of the omer. What is the omer? Omer is a gallon. For argument's sake, it's a volume measurement, exactly as you said. So Sefirat HaOmer means the counting of the gallon, or the counting of the Omer. What does that mean? You start counting the day that you bring the Omer of barley as an offering. So you get another mitzvah that's attached to the same date of the Omer. The Hakravat Omer, the Korban of the Omer. Okay, so what is it? You have to bring barley. This was the process. First day of Pesach, you go, you enjoy your thing, you have your four cups of wine that night. The next day is Yom Tov. That night, right? In Israel, they only keep 1 day, or this is the way the Torah is only 1 day. That night, meaning the first night of Chol HaMoed, they head out to the fields. they cut a bunch of barley, they bring the barley, they have it ready, they cut it, they harvest it, they sift it, they flour, they do the whole process. The next morning, they bring an omer worth of an offering. The second, they bring an omer worth of the offering. Now, all grain is azah. So you had everyone was holding their horses, everyone had their sandwiches ready. You brought the korban, go ahead and eat it. Okay, that's the difference between Yashan afterwards and Chadash is before. Right? It's Chadash, it's new, and becomes Yashan. The marker is the second day of Pesach. Now, when there's a korban, when does it switch over? The time period is when you have the korban, it switches over when you bring the korban. What do you do when there's no korban?
You can designate it.
No. Let's say today. Designating what? The process
In today's age.
today's or more to be more particular in the days of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai when there no longer is a mizbeach and there no longer is korbanot. So he's thinking, or what's the halacha? At what point? You can't tell me the time when I bring the offering because there's no offering to bring anymore. There's no Beit HaMikdash. So he has to deal with when does it start? So what halakha tells us, it's really a machloket, but what halakha tells us is that one opinion says from the beginning of the day, it starts. From the beginning of the day of the second day of Pesach, it starts. Okay, so let's go with that for a second. Okay, if it's the beginning of the day, what does that mean? That means any grain that you grow. Now, I'm just going to use the word Pesach loosely, but I'm talking about the second day of Pesach. Anything that you grow from before Pesach, the second you hit Pesach, that second day of Pesach, everything in the world is Yashan, right? Why? Because you have now, all of the grain in the world has experienced a Pesach. Once it experiences that second day of Pesach, it's called Yashan. The day after Pesach, literally every piece of grain in the world is Yashan. And practically speaking, the amount of time it takes for grain to grow, even the month after, so in the month of May, everything is Yashan. In the month of June, everything is Yashan. In the month of July, everything is Yashan. Until you get to the month of October. Like now you're giving yourself 6 months of somebody going and sowing the grain, watering it, giving it the proper season. You've gone through the whole summer season. Now the grain starts to grow. Now you cut it, you harvest it, you grind it, you sell it, convert it into flour, add it to water, you sell it to Kellogg's. Kellogg's goes and puts it in their Frosted Flakes. Frosted Flakes, they put the Tony the Tiger on top of it in the package. They send it over to the distribution center. The distribution center then sends it over to the next guy, sends it over to the next guy. Finally comes to your house. It takes time. Unless you're buying like Entenmann's cake, like they do it straight from the ground into your house, right? Like very fresh. But you're buying a thing of pasta. You wish that they harvested this grain last week. They harvested this grain a year ago, 2 years ago. You know what the shelf life on these things are? They never spoil. They literally could be 15 years. They could be older than me, right? Not that much. So now you get into the world of what is. I'm just explaining this to explain what Chadash and Yashan is. Okay, so what happens is for the first 6 months of the year, and when I say for the year, I mean starting from Pesach, everything is Yashan. After that, it's possible to start finding things, but it's going to be hard until the time of Hanukkah. Once you get to December, okay, now in December, you have to be a little bit more careful. By Purim time, which is what we're entering now, it's a real issue. Why is it a real issue? Because you're talking about anything that's grown in the last 11 months is Chadash, right? Because anything that grew after Pesach is Chadash until you get to the next Pesach. So Purim is like the most difficult time. Your Hamintashins, you have to be careful, right? At this time of year, it's more of a challenge. So if anyone says, I don't keep Chadash or I don't keep Yashan, you should tell them is not actually for the first 6 months of the year, you do. You definitely keep it. Yeah.
Because we have to exhaust the supply of flour within the network or within the country, let's say. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. But I'm not even saying to exhaust the supply. What I'm saying is like, let's say there was no supply in the world. The amount of time, the process takes time. So like,
finished product.
It's not even you going through and depleting your reserves. It's that for this grain, for you to be able to eat it, you have to sow it. It had to have been sowed and planted after Pesach. So that means done in April. And then it grows. And then after it grows more. And then they have to go cut it in the farms. And then the farms have to go do this. They have to do that. They have to go do this. By the time it gets to your table, it's not taking a month. Just for it to get, I'm just talking about practically speaking, for you to go to Everfresh and to go buy a box of cookies, if you just think about when was this flour actually sowed in the ground, it takes time. It takes time. And that's what I'm saying. There are some companies that they take pride, like Entenmann's. They do it fresh. It's actually a thing. Entenmann's probably is becoming Chadash earlier than Chips Ahoy or something.
What's the problem with eating Kimach Chadash? Why can't you eat?
The Torah says don't.
What's the reason?
Torah says don't eat pork. What's the reason?
Oh, so it's just the same thing. It's just pork.
So it's considered not kosher.
No. So I first of all, I gave like a very elaborate background as to what the point is. This makes more sense than pork. I'll say it again. There's all of this grain in the world. The first portion of it has to go to Hashem. That's how I started the whole thing up.
Because you didn't portion it, that's why you can't have it.
No, you didn't portion it. I'm trying to explain to you what the concept of the behind the mitzvah is. The Torah says the first of the grain every year, I want you to bring it as a korban. Don't eat before God eats. It's like a false start. You just went through a whole season. You just grew a whole batch of grain. First, take a portion, give it to Hashem, and then you eat from it. But don't eat before you serve to Hashem. Okay. So again, I'm putting a reason behind it, but you don't even have to say that. The Torah says don't eat it. The Torah gives you the markers this day, and that's it.
Here is that if you're eating it now, that they haven't given the portion to Hashem now because
No.
it's too early, no? Is that not
No.
true?
What portion? There's no Beit HaMikdash. The whole okay.
So
During
why is there even Kimach Chadash now if there's no Mikdash?
okay, I'll say it again.
I'm missing it.
Because so I'll go back. The time that there's a Beit HaMikdash, it's the korban, the first portion that sets the new cycle.
Right.
When there's no Beit HaMikdash, what's the marker? The date. Just when you get into the second day of Pesach, everything is free now. It's not a first portion anymore. It's now been transformed by going from the time you bring the korban to following the calendar date. It's just the date. That's where we got up until after the times of the Beit HaMikdash, because you can't go from the time of the korban. There is no more korban.
The Rabbanan now, or is it still going to?
Machloket. But our understanding is it's from the Torah. It's from the Torah.
All right.
It's for the Doraita. Yes. How come the Sephardim aren't machmir? Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are people that aren't machmir. It's a good question. It's a good question. This was not the point of the shir at all, but it's a very important topic because of the time period that we're in now. Okay, so very simple. How come people aren't familiar with this, or they're not so cautious about this? The answer is because the OU and the star K and the Chaf K will call something kosher even though it's Chadash. Simple as that. You know what? I should clarify. Not that it's Chadash. You don't know that it's Chadash, but that you don't know for certain that it's Yashan. Let me ask you a question. I bring you a Chips Ahoy cookie and I put it in front of you, okay? Is that Chadash or Yashan?
How do you know?
Right, exactly. What is it? So, okay, so if it's right after Pesach, then you know it's Yashan, practically speaking. But today, it might be Chadash, it might be Yashan. I don't know exactly. The only way I know for sure is if I'm able to track this back to when was this cut off the ground, right? Now, there are some tracking methods. You'd be surprised. You know why? Because it's not like everyone does whatever they want. The farmers in this country, in general, when you're farming, there's 2 seasons. It's called winter wheat, summer wheat. There's really just 2 seasons. There are certain wheats that are planted in the winter, and then again, some in the summer. There's 2 batches. So the winter wheat is Yashan. Why? Exactly. The summer wheat is Chadash. Why? Because this happened in the summer. Okay. If you can track this Chips Ahoy cookie, whether it was the winter wheat or the summer wheat, you are now getting closer to an answer.
You can easily track it. Every box has a batch number. They check for.
Correct.
viruses and diseases and lettuce and everything.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
What facility, what data was.
So you're getting to a point where there is a way to find out. However, even that is not so clear. It's not so clear. Why? Because they put dates on it to cover themselves. So for example, they know that when I cut this grain, the shelf life of this, let's say, is 3 years. So what are they going to do? They're going to put 2 years on it. Okay. So now, if it's 2 years, you might be able to figure out their formula, which that's what many people do, is they go to these companies, ask them, hey, when you print the best if used by or best if eaten by date, how do you calculate that? If they are going to be open enough to share with you the calculation, and the calculation is based on the harvest. Sometimes it's not based on the harvest. Sometimes it's based on when they put flour and water together, which you don't know how long it's been before that, for example. But if they are going to tell you what their formula is, and if the formula is somehow tied to the harvest, then you can reverse engineer exactly which harvest it's from. Simple as that. You can, but you don't always know for sure, because it could be how they're being strict. Like I said, they might be rounding down. If they're somewhere in between, they might round down. Okay, with all of that said, to answer your question, Yosef, Ashkenazim are more lenient because the Rama has a leniency where he basically says it's 2 doubts. It might actually be okay. I never know for sure that it's a problem. I see a cookie, I assume that maybe it's okay, maybe it's not, maybe it's Chadash, maybe it's not. It's Safek, he throws in something else. He says, okay, so that's why it's allowed. Sfaradim, Shulchan Aruch doesn't hold by that. So the first things first is, there's a machloket as to whether it's allowed or not, and Sfaradim say it's not allowed. Ashkenazim say, well, since you don't know when it's from, then you could be lenient. So even the Ashkenazim, let me ask you, if tomorrow you came to them and said, yeah, but I know exactly when it's from, what would they say? You do know, right? Like the whole reason for the leniency of the Ashkenazim is because you don't know when it's from. But if I bring you written on paper of when it's from, how are they going to argue?
No excuse.
Yeah, there's no way out. So really, it's somewhat surprising how much of the world, the Jewish world, the Orthodox Jewish world, completely disregards it. Now, there's one more thing to add to this. There are opinions that say that in Israel it's from the Torah, outside of Israel it's from the rabbis. There's opinions that say that. Okay, so now you can start saying, well, you're not sure, and it's only rabbinical, and this and that. And even that, we don't hold like that opinion. We hold that it's from the Torah. We hold that it's from the Torah everywhere. But there are opinions that say that. But because of that, if you buy any grain item in Israel, by definition, for it to be kosher, it has to be yashan. That means if you buy anything with a credible hashgacha, you buy any cookie in Israel with a credible hashgacha, rabbanut, something that says it's kosher, what they're checking for is to make sure it's yashan. So in Israel, it's all yashan. This is why, like someone, for example, recently was saying there was like getting pastries from Noir, and they were saying, is this yashan? I said, look, I don't know how they do it, but they claim that everything is from Israel. Right? They literally, the guy bakes it in Israel and brings it here. So if that, right, they claim that it's all Israeli products. I don't know what they do, but if it's an Israeli product, it's yashan. Simple as that. Why? Because they wouldn't get the hashgacha if it's not yashan. Can we lobby the OU to start making things yashan? Yes, you can. There are places that are trying to be yashan, and I'm pretty sure Everfresh, you could get everything yashan options. Shopta, you get things thing options. You could get from these pizza stores. Many of them are yashan, and you could ask them, the mashgiachs. It's become something that people are more aware of. That you could ask the mashgiach, and the mashgiach will say, I was just somewhere recently and I asked them what's yashan, and they said everything except for this. These buns aren't yashan. So there was like a burger place, and they said, oh, the fries are this, and that is this, everything is yashan except for the burger buns are not. But they have baguettes, so you have it in a baguette. Or they have a gluten-free. Gluten-free is always going to be yashan because it's not from grain. You're going to get yourself into oats. It's a different question. But like you figure things out, and I'll show you a funny story in a second. But yeah, question?
Sorry, a little off the thing, but
Getting back on track.
The barley of the 5 grains that we can't have on Pesach. How are they bringing that on the second day of Pesach?
Okay, very good question. So, just practically speaking, you're saying, how would they bring a korban of barley on the second day of Pesach? It's chametz. What's the answer? Barley by itself isn't chametz, and neither is wheat, neither is oat, spelt, or rye. In fact, you have it as a matzah. What is chametz is when you take barley and you put it together with water and you let it sit. So what the process was, the first day of Pesach is over, that night they would go out to the field. Barley on the ground is not chametz. Barley on the ground is not chametz. They would cut it. They would harvest it. They would make sure it wouldn't get wet. They would make sure they're working in very dry areas. They would grind it, make flour out of it, and without water. You're exactly right. You can't put water.
Make it flour, then take it to the Beit HaMikdash?
Correct.
Just take it off the stalk?
No. There would be a flour problem. Yeah, that's like in the Omer offering. Yeah. So they would tarp it. They would tarp it. There's a lot of discussion about what they would do. These people are, like these people that they probably started from the day after Pesach. Day after Pesach, the guy went and he stuck it in and he just sat there. Like this was like a job. They didn't just get it from anyone's backyard. They didn't just order it on Amazon Fresh and they just took whatever came. There was a specific field next to the Beit HaMikdash that was designated for this purpose.
Also, you could just have one Omer korban for like all of Amri, just do that one and all the week.
That's how it's done. Not just you could have. That's how it's done. No, it's the field next to the Beit HaMikdash. When the Beit HaMikdash brings the offering of an Omer, which is this much, it becomes permitted to the whole world.
One korban.
One korban.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, that was because I was trying to explain to you the concept as to why we have this by saying you take the first part and give it to Hashem, but it's not you. It's the Beit Din gives the first portion, and now it becomes permitted for the whole world. Okay, and nowadays when there's no korban, you just go by the date. Exactly, it's a communal offering.
This applies to non-Jewish farmers also, like a lot of the.
It's the grain that you eat. It doesn't matter who the owner is. It's like pork. Right? It doesn't matter if a Jew owns the pork or a goy owns the pork. You can't eat it. Same concept. You can't eat the grain before it becomes yashem. Okay, I'll just tell you one thing. At Yeshiva University, the Sfaradis Sfaradim were trying to ask the cafeteria to provide more yashan options. It's Ashkenazi or an Ashkenazi thing. They're saying there's many of them saying, "Give us yashan, give us yashan." They said, "Okay, we make a petition." So we made a petition. We got signatures. We showed them. They said, "Okay, fine." So they would get buns and they would get breads, they would get yashan options. Not everything was yashan, they got yashan options. So there was a guy who would be doing hamburgers, a Spanish guy, and he would be doing hamburgers and he would have buns. And when they said, okay, starting this week, we're going to get yashan. So the first night, opening night, I'm going to go try the yashan. So I went to the guy, and it must have been that I was the first person to ask. It must have been. Or maybe not. But the guy was flipping the thing. I said, I want to have 2 burgers. And I said, and I want the yashan buns. So, you have the new. They said there's going to be new yashan. He's like, and he calls to the guy in the back. He's like, he's asking for the Joshen bread. He wants the Joshen bread. And then I was like, yeah, I want the Joshen bread. So he goes, he pulls out the pack of hamburger buns, but it says yashan on it. He's like, I'm not allowed to touch these. You take 2 of them out. He gave me the plastic bag. He told me to take 2 bags out myself because he's not allowed to touch it. He thought it's like some sort of like a holy thing that if he touches it, it becomes tameh. It just means that this bread is less fresh than the other bread. It's just older bread. And he thought he's not allowed. He's like, I'm not allowed to touch your Joshen bread. Here, we got some Joshen bread for you. It was very, very Amash, he had no idea. But the truth is, he probably knew more about it than many Jews do. Many people, we really don't know about this. Rav Hershel Schechter was here about 6 months ago. And he's one of the rabbinic directors of OU, and he knows this topic better than all of us combined. He knows that he knows that you should be doing it. So he asked him, how come the OU policy isn't that you need to require yashan? He said, because people aren't complaining about it. If you send emails, write letters, and complain about it, we'll do it. So someone said, I asked you this question 7 years ago. and you told me the same thing. And he said, okay, so keep doing it. Keep writing letters, keep doing things, and eventually you'll get there. But I do think how there are some within the OU world that are very strict themselves. Even I believe what I heard is that one of the rabbanim behind the kashrut, like Ganek, they said he himself is very makpid in having yashan. And any mashkiach you ask knows. If not, he doesn't know what he's doing. Any mashkiach, you go to any of the places, you ask them, do you have yashan? Do you know if it's yashan? They should know. And like whatever, it gets complicated. But I think we went completely off topic. But it's an important topic to know. It's an important topic to know. Okay. Wow. I really think we should just end it here. But okay, let's go back to the Gemara. Oh, we didn't even get to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. V'sheyeheh yom hanef kulo asur. So Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana, and he said, you know what? Now that there's no Beit HaMikdash, I want the entire day that they would bring the korban, I want the entire day to also be asur. What does that mean? For argument's sake, they would bring the korban, let's say they would bring it in the middle of the day at 12 o'clock. So when the Beit HaMikdash is around, they would know that the grain would be permitted when the korban was offered. It was waved, beforehand it was waved, so that's called the day of the waving. It was done, let's say, around 12 noon. So starting from 12 noon, you're allowed to eat it. But he said, I want you to wait the full day. The takana that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made was that Yashan doesn't kick in until the 16th day of Nisan, meaning the second day of Pesach, it's finished. Not at the beginning, not at the onset of the day, but at the conclusion of the day. That was his takana. We're going to see in the Gemara why he did that. Okay, let's go. Minalan de'avdinan zechel hamikdash. The question is on Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. How do we know that from the Torah, the word minalan is asking for some sort of a biblical source? So minalan, how do you know from the Torah, from the Tanakh, that we should do things, enactments, to commemorate the Beit HaMikdash, right? He came and he said, okay, we used to take the Lulav only one day, but now, Zechel HaMikdash, to remember the Beit HaMikdash, we're going to take the Lulav 7 days. How do you know that you should be doing something like that? The Amar Ka, because the Pasuk in Yirmiyahu said, this is what the Torah said about when we were suffering with no Beit HaMikdash. Hashem says, I will restore health to you, and I will heal you from your wounds. God said, this is in the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Hashem said, I'll heal you. Because you are called an outcast. People around the world are saying that you, the Jewish people, are now an outcast. Sion hi doresh enla. The city of Sion has no one who cares to even ask about her. Michlal de baya derisha. From here you see that we want ourselves to ask about it, to remember about it, to do things to remember. So this is basically what we're saying. We're saying in Yirmiyahu, it's talking about when the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. What Yirmiyahu says, Hashem says, your situation is so bad because no one even cares about Beit HaMikdash. No one's even asking about it. No one's even doing anything to remember it. That's how bad the situation is. That Doresh Enla, no one's even asking about it. So what do you learn from this pasuk? That when there's no Beit HaMikdash, you should be asking about it. That's what Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying, that now in the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, we need to do things to make sure we don't forget about Yerushalayim. Because if we forget about the Beit HaMikdash, that's what Hashem is saying that needs to be healed. The fact that no one's asking about it. I need to make sure we don't forget about it. I'm going to start making enactments. What's my enactment? Enactment number, what we're saying here is, take the Lulav all 7 days to commemorate what we used to do in the Beit HaMikdash. Good? Okay, good. Question?
Basically, the Jews weren't asking about Yerushalayim, about Beit HaMikdash, not
Correct. The very fact that Yerushalayim didn't have people asking about it, Jews, non-Jews, anyone, that it's just there and no one cares is a disgrace. So what Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying is that if the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed and we don't do anything to commemorate it, to think about it, it's a disgrace. We need to make sure that it's in our action. We do. We mentioned in the Yerushalayim in many places. At the Chuppah, we say Ima Shkachech Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini. At a Brit Milah, we say Ima Shkachech Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini. We break the glass on the thing. There are times when someone builds a house, they're supposed to leave a portion of their house unbuilt, unfinished, unplastered, because you're saying, my home is not complete if Hashem's home is not complete. These are the things that we have built in throughout our lives, and this is another one. What is another one? We take the Lulav all 7 days as they used to do in the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? Good. So that's the Lulav one. Very simple. Let's move on to the one about the Yom Hanef. So what is the Yom Hanef? It's the day of the waving. Okay. Let me try to think if I should try to do it like this. Okay, I'm gonna do my calendar this way. What is the first day of Pesach? Okay. We're gonna make something on the fly together. So this is the first day of Pesach, right? So when is the Korban HaOmer brought? On this day. Korban HaOmer. This is also called the day of waving. Okay? Good? So on what day do you go from Chadash to Yashan? On the 16th, it goes from Chadash to Yashan. Does that make sense? Okay, so now let me just make this a little bit nicer. I'll put a box over here. Okay, did the box work? Yes, sort of. Okay. Something with my colors that freezes my computer. Shouldn't have done that. Okay, so while it's deciding to color, let's just read a little bit of the Gemara and we're going to come to this. V'sheyeheh yom hanef kulo asur. His second takana in our Mishnah was that I want the entire day of the 16th of Nisan, I want the entire day to be asur, which means it doesn't turn Yashan during that day. Okay? My ta'ama. What's his reasoning? Here's why. He says, Mehera yibaneh bet hamikdash. Very soon, inshallah, Be'ezrat Hashem, the Beit HaMikdash is going to get built. What are people going to go by? People are going to go by what they were experiencing, right? During the times of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, what were they doing? V'yomeru, and they're going to say, Ishtakad milo achalnu beheir mizrach. When did we do it last year? The beginning of the day. Achshav nami necho. So we're going to start eating from the beginning of the day, which means his concern was as follows. This is a day of waving. So during the times of the Beit HaMikdash, it goes from Chadash Yashan, when bring the offering. This is the times of Beit HaMikdash. But not during the times of the Beit HaMikdash, after the Beit HaMikdash, when does it change from Chadash to Yashan? Here, hold on. This is Chadash to Yashan when bring the offering. So this Yashan from the morning. It's already Yashan from the morning. So let's call this around 12 noon.
Before the Hashana.
Which one?
From the morning.
Correct. This is what the law would say. During the times of Beit HaMikdash, it would go from 12. Or not really after the Beit HaMikdash, but when there is no Beit HaMikdash, when there is no Korban, what the Torah law would be is that it's Yashan from the morning. But then Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai came and said, Chadash all day. And when does it become Yashan? The next day over here. Okay? Does this make sense? I'm like trying to, hey?
Not even at night.
What happened? Yeah, good call. Sorry, not even at the night. No, well, maybe the night.
Well, the night's the next day, no?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it should be the night. Okay, let me just clean this up a little bit here. So I'm not exactly sure, but let's just say from the 17th, okay, to cover myself. Okay, it's just from the 17th. I'm pretty sure you're right. I think it's from the night. Yeah, exactly. So, but the key is that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that I wanted to go from Yashan, instead of it being at the beginning of the day, I wanted to start at the end of the day. Okay? The Gemara says, what is he worried about? Why are you changing this? He says, yeah, you know why? Because if we were to follow this, the Yashan from the morning, what's going to happen? Next year, there's going to be a Beit HaMikdash, and they're all going to start having Yashan. They're going to eat the food for breakfast, because that's what they did last year. right? You have this food, this bread, this grain, it's Chadash, and it becomes Yashan when there's no Korban, it becomes Yashan in the morning. So at 7 a.m. for breakfast, they have matzah pizza, and their matzah pizza is Yashan. Okay, that's what they do. But when we go back to the Beit HaMikdash, 7 a.m. is not ready. You have to wait until you have the Korban. So he's worried that tomorrow, when the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt, that breakfast time of that day, people are going to come to eat Chadash. It's going to be a problem. So he says, you know what? I want to go the full day. Obviously, the next question is, so then why wouldn't you stop at like 12 noon? But why do you say? But that's what he's saying. I want the entire day to be Asur. Okay, let's read it one more time. Soon the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt. And they'll say, last year, didn't we eat in the morning as soon as we saw the sun in the east, meaning at sunrise? So now we also want to eat. But what's the problem if you eat it if you eat this Chadash grain after sunrise on the day of the Korban? You're eating Chadash. When does it become Yashan? After the Korban. But you didn't bring the Korban yet. So he didn't like this practice. Even though that's what would be permitted, he came and he said, I don't want to do it. Okay. All right, they're going to say, they wouldn't realize that last year there was no Korban Omer, then sunrise is what permitted it, that it became permitted at sunrise. Hashata, but this year, the Ika Omer, that there is a Korban Omer Matir, the Korban, the waving of the Korban in the afternoon is what permits it. This is what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was concerned about. So the Gemara says, but why do you need to say that it's going to be Chadash all day and only start on the next day? Right? Let's read it. The Mivne Emat. When is this going to be built? Are you telling me it's going to be built on this 16th day? It's getting built on this day? If the Beit HaMikdash is going to be built on this 16th day, then sunrise it would be permitted because they aren't bringing the Korban yet. It's it's an interesting question why you're asking. But you're going to understand in a second why. It's saying, what was the concern? The concern is next year, when we're going to have the Beit HaMikdash, people are going to think, well, last year I had it for breakfast, I had my Chadash grain for breakfast, and they're going to come to do it again this year, but there's going to be a Beit HaMikdash, and they're going to have to wait until the Korban is brought, and people are not going to realize that things change. Fine? But it's saying, okay, but when is it going to get rebuilt? Is it going to get rebuilt on the 16th? If it gets rebuilt on the 16th, the second there was sunrise, it was permitted. So there's no issue with that year. So what happens? Maybe it got built on the 15th. It got built on the first day of Sukkot. But if that's the case, so why do you need to make the entire day Asur? Just say from 12 noon. Up until 12 noon is prohibited, but then make it permitted. Why? Because we learn in Mishnah, people who lived far away and you don't know what's going on in the Beit HaMikdash, you're allowed to start having your yashan, your bread. You're allowed to start having it from 12 noon, from midday. Why? The fish and bedin mitatzilimbo, because the bedin isn't lazy with this. Usually they get it out of the way by 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 12. It's definitely done. They're not leaving it until that time. They know that this is something that the whole world is waiting on them. So usually it's the type of thing that it's like 8 a.m. it's done. But if you want to wait until the last minute is going to be 12 noon. They're not going to bring it after that. They never leave it after that. So what's your concern? Are they going to build it on the 16th? If they're going to build it on the 16th, then they're allowed to have it for breakfast because there was no Korban yet. If they built it on the 15th, they're going to bring the Korban the next day by 12 noon. So why do you need to extend it and say it's Asur for the whole second half of the day? Let them eat it from 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, what's the problem? The Gemara is going to say, you know what it is? Crazy. You know what it is? It was done at the 15th, end of the day. Or the 15th at night. Which means the Beit HaMikdash would have been built the night over here is going to be built. So when you come to the next morning, it's not going to become mutar right away because they should be bringing the korban. But since they don't have enough time to prepare because they just finished building the Beit HaMikdash, they're going to have to go harvest the grain. It's going to take them longer until the full day. So for that situation, he's going to extend the extra couple hours. Very, very tough answer. Like you're telling me that he made a takana, and his takana was in case the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt on the first night of Pesach, and since it's not the first night of Pesach, the end of the first day of Pesach, or on the second night of Pesach, that on that night it's getting built. So since it's getting built, we didn't have time to go cut the grain. So tomorrow's, it's like hard to say this, right? But this is what the Gemara's first answer is. The second answer, I think, flows a little bit better. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar. He says, no, there's really another thing that's going on here. Amar Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai b'shitat Rabbi Yehuda Amara. He is actually going according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And now things will fit better. Rabbi Yehuda, now we just turned the page to 30b, Lamed Amud Bet. What was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? The Amar. Rabbi Yehuda said, Ad etzem hayom hazeh. You shouldn't eat the grain until this day. Ad atzmo shel yom, until this very self-same day, because savar ad ve'ad bichlal. It means until and including. Don't eat the grain until and including the day of the 16th, which means now what we're saying is this whole section of the times of the Beit HaMikdash, it changes when we bring the offering. When there's no korban, it's not necessarily Yashan from the morning. It's machloket. When there's no Beit HaMikdash, Yashan from the morning is one opinion. But Rabbi Yehuda is going to say Yashan from the 17th. So now what it's saying is Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai felt that between this and that, the opinion, the halacha is not like the Tanna Kama, the opinion is like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so we're going to have to explain what this means. But he held that in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, it becomes Yashan when you brought the Korban. When there's no Beit HaMikdash, it becomes Yashan at the end of the day, at the 17th. It's the end of the day. That's when it becomes Yashan. And so Rabban Yochanan ben made a takana that it should always be going up to the end of the day. But hold on a second. Rabbi Yehuda says that the law is from the Torah that in a situation when there's no Korban, it becomes Yashan at the end of the day, meaning at the beginning of the 17th. So Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that you do at the beginning of the 17th. That's what if he's going to hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that's the Torah law. So let's read it. Umi savar la kavate. Is it possible that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai actually holds like Rabbi Yehuda? Maflik paligale. Rabbi Yehuda argues with him. Did not, because we learned in the Mishnah. Look at this Mishnah. Mishachara Beit HaMikdash. When the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Hitkin Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made an enactment. He made an institution. Sheyeh Yom Hanef Kulo Asur. That the day of waving, the entire 16th day would be prohibited to eat, and it only becomes permitted on the 17th day. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yehuda says, what? What are you talking about? V'halomina Torah Asur. That's the law from the Torah. The opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is that's a Torah law. The Torah law is that when there's no korban, the entire 16th day is asur. It only becomes permitted on the 17th, right? He's saying this is what Rabbi Yehuda says. This is the Torah law. And then Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai stands up and says, now that there's no Beit HaMikdash, I'm going to make an enactment that it's on the starting on the 17th. That's the law. Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yehuda argues with him. If Rabbi Yehuda argues with him, then clearly that can't be what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Right? It's prohibited from the Torah. The Gemara answers, no, Hatam, Rabbi Yehuda, hu dekata'eh. Rabbi Yehuda is not understanding Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yehuda is making a mistake. When he's attacking him, he's making a mistake. Ihu savar Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai midrabban kamar. He thinks that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is coming up with a rabbinic enactment. Velohi midoraita kamar. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying this is a Torah law. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, now that there's no Beit HaMikdash, the Torah law is you have to assume the entire 16th day. It's Chadash. You can't eat it. You can only start eating on the 17th day of Nisan. That's what the Torah law is. Okay, what's the problem with saying this? If Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is just telling us the Torah law, then why is it saying he enacted? What did you enact? You didn't enact anything. You're saying what the Torah law is. He came up with an enactment, so no. V'hitkin kataneh. It says that he enacted. Ma hitkin. What does it mean he enacted? Darash v'hitkin. He interpreted the verses and explained that we now need to start doing this. You see, for the past 400 some odd years, when did things become Chadash or Yashan? The time of the offering. Around 12 noon. Now that it's the first year that we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, Rabbani Yochanan ben Zakkai stands up and says, gentlemen, ladies, starting from now on, we need to start assuming the entire, you can't eat the grain the whole 16th day, you could only start eating on the 17th day. And they say, oh, you heard what Rabbani Yochanan ben Zakkai said? Now, he's just telling us the law of the Torah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, but it's his enactment because he's the one that said, okay, now it's time to start following this. Meaning he was the one that said, this is the Torah law that we need to start following now. Okay, so I just want to give a quick recap, and instead, I still want to do one more Mishnah. We're not done. But let's just do a quick recap, okay? Our Mishnah teaches us two things, and the only reason why this is difficult is because we're living in an Ashkenazi world. I bet you if you were living in a Sephardi world, you would be very familiar with this concept. But let's just talk about the Yashan one first, because it's a little bit more complicated. Then we'll talk about Lulav. It's easier. The Yashan one is as follows. Yashan, we just explained, okay, without getting into the details, this is the law. The law is, on the 16th of Nisan, which is the second day of Pesach, there has to be a Korban Omer that's brought, and it's usually brought by 12 noon. It's usually brought in the morning, but let's say it's brought by 12 noon. The Korban Omer is brought from what type of grain? From barley. How much of the barley is brought? An Omer's worth. The Omer Asirita Ifahu, it's 1/10 of a thing. It's about the volume measurement of 43 eggs, whatever. You bring let's call it this big. You bring a volume measurement of an Omer of barley, and once you do that, what happens? And everything that has grown up until this point is now Yashan. The whole world is Yashan. Okay? That's because the Korban is Matir. The Korban is what makes things mutar. When there is no Korban, when do things become mutar?
Second day.
Correct. Well, which end of it? The first end of that, meaning the beginning of it, the end, or the end of it? Sorry? The answer is machloket. One opinion says He'ir HaMizrach, meaning sunrise, so the morning. The other one says Ad Vichal, until and including the whole day. Okay? So we know it's going to be that second day of Pesach. Just two opinions of whether it's the beginning or the end. Now, Rabbani Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana. What was his takana? After the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Rabbani Yochanan ben Zakkai came and said what? Yom Hanef Kulo Asur. What does that mean? The entire day is forbidden, which means when does it become Yashan?
17.
At the end of the 16th, correct. The end of the day, which is the 7th. Okay? Then we try to understand, okay, how does his enactment fit in the two opinions? According to the one that says it's mutar already from the start of the day, well, he's coming and he's adding a day. Why are you adding a day? I'm adding a day because I'm concerned that there's going to be a Beit HaMikdash, and then we're going to have to wait. And if we start from the beginning of the day, next year when there's a Beit HaMikdash, you're going to do it at the wrong time. So I'm going to say make the whole day Asur. There's another opinion of Yehuda that says the times of no Beit HaMikdash, the whole day is Asur, meaning through the end of the day is going to be Asur. And Rabbi Zakkai comes and agrees with that. And now that's what we have to start following. And it's called his institution, it's his enactment, because he was the one that said we got to start doing this now from the law of the Torah. Okay? That's one enactment that he made. So I want you to be able to tell me in one sentence, in 5 words, what was Rabbani Yochanan ben Zakkai's takana? What did he enact with respect to Yashan? What did he do? Very good. That the grain, the new grain, is asur on the entire 16th of Nisan. The entire day. It only becomes permitted at the end of the day, starting from the 17th. That's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai came and said. We spoke about why. And the other thing that he did was about Lulav. Lulav was very nice and simple. Okay, now all of a sudden it becomes like easy, like this is first grade work. In the Beit HaMikdash, they would take the Lulav all 7 days, but outside the Beit HaMikdash, they don't take it. 1. After the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that everyone should do it for 7 days. Zecher Lamikdash, to remember what we used to do in the Beit HaMikdash. They used to do it 7 in Beit HaMikdash, so we're going to do it 7 outside of the Beit HaMikdash to commemorate so that we don't forget. Okay? There was a question? You had a question, yes.
If he's following the opinion of this Rebbe Yehuda, why is it that it's his takana? It's his opinion. He's the one who had the whole idea.
So Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai came decades before Rabbi Yehuda. So when we say he's going in the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, he never met Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda wasn't alive during his time. It's saying that he's following that shita, he's following that opinion, not that rabbi, but he is of the opinion that from the Torah, it would be prohibited the entire day long. Why is it called his institution? Why is it called his enactment? Because he was the chief rabbi that said that's what we need to start doing there.
So then why is Rebbe Yehuda mentioned?
Because that's how we know. Because again, the machloket as to when there's no Beit HaMikdash, when the grain is supposed to become asur or permitted. One opinion says the beginning of the day, one opinion says the end of the day. This machloket existed at the times of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai also. Not in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda didn't exist yet. But that those two differing opinions existed. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai held like the opinion that it's asur for the entire day long. At first, we didn't realize that. So how is the Gemara telling you that? The Gemara is telling you that by saying he's of the opinion that Rabbi Yehuda tells us that it's really at the end of the day. He held that same way. It's not that he held like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. It's that he held that it's the entire day long, which is what 100 years later is what Rabbi Yehuda tells us the law is also. It would be similar to saying something like, if the Rambam says something, you say, no, the Rambam holds like Rav Ovadia Yosef. And if the Rambam made an enactment, you would say, why do you call it your enactment? It should be the enactment of Rav Ovadia Yosef. You know, Rav Ovadia Yosef is just explaining like that opinion, that halacha. So Rabbi Yehuda is explaining that halacha that you have to go from the end of the day. That's how Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai held, but generations early. Okay, good. Okay, I was gonna try to do the next Mishnah, but I don't know if you think we should try to push through. We can do the next Mishnah. Let's do the next Mishnah and we'll repeat it next time. How about that? Okay? Let's go. One more enactment. There we go. You know, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has another punch in him. Initially, they used to accept testimony for the new moon the entire day long. Oh, you guys thought you were done with the moon. You're not done with the moon. He came back. The moon came back. He needed to just say goodbye to you because he missed you. So this is what it's saying. Rosh Hashana comes. How many days are there in the moon cycle?
29 now.
I don't accept. Oh, you said it. What? Very good, Andrew. You got it. You got it. What did you say? And a 30th.
4:30.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. So that's also a correct answer.
You said it.
What did you say?
29 days, 12 hours, 42 minutes, 3 and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's the most precise one.
Yeah. I mean, that's what he said, just in a different language. But yeah, that's exactly right. He said 793 chalakim, which is the same as 44 minutes in the 3rd second. Very good. Okay, I don't think we're going to get through this, Mishnah. I'll just say some things outside here. So basically, it would be as follows. A month is going to be either 29 days or 30 days, because the month cycle is around 29 and a half days approximately. Or more precisely, it's 29 and a half and 44 minutes and 3 1/3 of a second. Okay, so it's about 3 3/4 of an hour. Okay, about 44 minutes and 3 1/3 seconds. So now the month could either be 29 days or 30 days, which means Rosh Chodesh could either be on the 30th day with respect to the last month, or the 31st day with respect to the last month. Rosh Chodesh is going to be one of those two. So for it to be on the 30th day, how do we know if it's on the 30th day? Because you needed to have witnesses show up on the 30th day and say, I saw the moon last night, right? So the 29th day is over. That night, people are seeing it. They're coming to the court on the 30th day and saying, I saw the moon last night. The 30th day has now become the first day of the month. The last month didn't even have a 30th day. The last month was the 29-day month. And today is the first of Tishrei. Tomorrow is the second of Tishrei. Now is Rosh Hashana, because you came and you told me you saw it last night. If no witnesses showed up, what would we say? The next day, which is the 31st day, is actually the first of Tishrei. And today was the 30th of Elul. So what we need to do is we need to stick around and wait to see if witnesses come. Okay? So here's the issue. In the morning, witnesses aren't going to be there yet. By 6 a.m., witnesses aren't there yet. Today might be Rosh Hashana. If witnesses come and tell me that we saw the moon last night, today is Rosh Hashana. Okay, 10 o'clock. Is today Rosh Hashana yet? Maybe I don't know. That's 11 o'clock. Is it Rosh Hashana today? I don't know. I got to do the shofar. Am I doing the shofar or not? Like, I'll tell you, just relax. I don't know. They're not here. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Is it Rosh Hashana yet? I don't know. Wajum, do we blow the shofar yet or not? So what they used to do is that they would accept witnesses until the last minute. Until the last minute, someone comes and they saw it, they say, yeah, we did it. We got the shofar in, it's Rosh Hashana. Let's read it. They would accept the testimony about the new moon the entire day. 1 year we had a problem. The witnesses came very late. They left it for the 11th hour. Like literally, you heard that term before? They left it for the 11th hour. And the Leviim sang the wrong song during the Korban. We're going to explain what this means. But essentially, when they bring the Korban in the afternoon, the Korban of the Mincha, the Leviim are supposed to sing a song. And every day of the week has its own song. It's the Shir Shel Yom that we say. Those are Shir Hayom Yom Revi'i B'Shavat HaKodesh Hashir Shahayu HaLeviim Omrim Al HaDuchan. That's what we say. The Shir Shel Yom. That's what they say. But Rosh Hashana has its own shir, has its own song. So what happened was the witnesses came so late. Yeah, they were able to get the shofar out. Yeah, they were still able to get the musaf out. They were still able to do that. But the Leviim already brought the Korban Mincha. They already brought the Korban Mincha. And the Leviim sang a weekday song. They sang the wrong song. They did the wrong thing. The Gemara, we're going to discuss like, okay, it's not the end of the world. So you said the wrong crank of Tehillim. Big deal. Most people don't even say the Shir Shel Yom. Right? So we're going to say like, what's the big deal about it? But the problem is the Leviim did something wrong. Hitkinu, so they made a takana. Shelo yehu mikablim ela ad mincha. They, the rabbis in the Beit HaMikdash, made a takana that if it's the time of mincha time, which is about 3 hours before the end of the day, we're not accepting anymore. So let's call it 3 p.m. We close the doors, even though the day is not over until 6 p.m. 3 p.m. we close the doors. Sorry, come back tomorrow. Like, I saw the. I don't want to hear it. We're not accepting any testimony from you. 3 p.m. it's closed. But let's say they come at 4 p.m. They would say, okay, let's continue to assume today is a Kodesh day. Today is a holy day. We're not going to do work. It's the holy day. Ulmachar Kodesh, and tomorrow will also be Rosh Chodesh. Tomorrow will also be Rosh Hashana. Which means if they came at the end of the day and they knew that really is the first day of the month, so they treated the rest of the day as a holy day, but then they treated tomorrow as a holy day also. Now, where did Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai come in? Mishachara Beit HaMikdash. When the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, guess what? We didn't have a problem of the Leviim doing the wrong thing during the Korban anymore. So what did he do? He said, I'm taking it back to how it used to be. He said, I am going to accept testimony for the new moon the entire day. He still had the Sanhedrin. He still had the Supreme Court. They were still making the calendar by the moon. He said, I really should be doing it all day long. In the Beit HaMikdash, 1 year, they didn't do it because they had the Leviim got very upset. Be careful around them. They had this whole issue. They sing the wrong thing. They got upset. Okay, fine. So they stopped accepting testimony from 3 p.m. But he says, there's no more Leviim. There's no more Korbanot. What's the issue? I'm going to accept, if someone comes to my door at 5 o'clock, I'm still going to accept this testimony. That's what Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made another takana. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was someone who made, I think it's 9 takanot, if I'm not mistaken. We already learned a bunch of them. He moved the courts. He moved the shofar and Shabbat to Yavne, as you said. He did the whole thing about Yashan, how the whole day is going to be Chadash, the whole 16th day. He made the Lulav for all 7 days of Sukkot. This is another one that he allowed the testimony of the witnesses to come in the last quarter of the day on Rosh Hashana, even though they had abolished that during the times of Beit HaMikdash, he came and he reverted. Next time we'll go through this Mishnah again. We'll discuss the details of this again. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everyone on the Zoom. Have a good night. See you next week.